If you could just give me, do I have screen share ability?
Oh, that would help, wouldn't it? Think I'd be better at that by now. Okay, you should be good.
Thank you. All right, let's see what I can find. No, that's not me. Am I sharing your screen, Jessica?
I don't see anything sharing right now. I did see it for a minute and it looked just like your Zoom login window.
Yep, because everything on here is not my computer. There's like an iPad. Let me see.
I don't see anything sharing. Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Yes, now we see it.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, can you guys see my?
Yes,
okay.
Session 4.
Perfect. I'm gonna move this around a little bit. Whoops, I clicked the wrong thing. Sorry, guys. I am not with it this morning. All right, Session 4. We did it. And hopefully I've said something good enough to keep most of you around because you guys keep coming back. So that's exciting for me. I wasn't sure how many people would stick around or come back for the calls, so that's good. Here is our visual checklist. We are on our last session, and so this is another example of how you can support executive function, even for those kids who really don't need, even kids who are not cognitive, or even for adults, we still need checklists. So I did this each session for you, just so you can see this is just another really simple way to support executive function. And so our next slide, it might start right away, which I'm wanted to just see. Last time I gave you guys a lot of resources, and I need to pause this. There, I'm just gonna leave that screen off because it's driving me nuts because I can't focus with it on there. But it said, how did that work out for you? And so the last time we talked about behavior and how behavior connects to executive function deficits and how it can really deteriorate executive function if it's not supported in the correct way. And so I gave you guys lots of visuals, and I gave you a task to use some visual supports for behavior or even academic. So I wanted to see if anybody was interested in sharing if they implemented any strategies since the last time we met. Anyone? Sorry, I can't see everybody yet. There we go. Okay, well, if anybody is interested in sharing, just feel free to speak up. Doesn't matter what slide we're on, and then you can interrupt and tell us how it worked out. Excuse me. So I found a really funny video on TikTok the other day when I was going down a rabbit hole because I can't focus. And I just thought this was really funny. If you are a person that struggles with executive function, you will totally understand this. If you are a person who has great executive function, you're going to be like, what is the problem? Just do it. So I thought this might give you a good perspective for people who really struggle with that executive function. So just some comedy to start us off. Oh no, I stopped my screen share. I'm gonna go back to that. But that is, I thought that I related really well to that. I have sticky notes all over my desk. I have really good intentions and I do use them, but yesterday, instead of starting my assessments that I needed to do or printing off my data collection sheets that I needed, I rearranged my classroom because that was the top priority and it wasn't. But I was anxious, so I had to do something else. So just kind of some comedy to show you how the brain works for some people. Oh no, here we go. So today I wanted to talk about, we've talked about how you can support executive function in the classroom, how you can support students throughout their day, how you can support behavior. But the other thing that sometimes we don't think about or we take for granted is how are we supporting the people that we work with? Because just like myself and probably some of you on this call, you may struggle with executive function as well. And so we have to think about how are we supporting the people that we work with and the people that work with the students that we work with to help them stay feeling balanced and understanding what they need to do. So one way that you can do this, one way that I try anyway, and I actually interviewed all of my paraprofessionals yesterday. I have 4 of them in my classroom. And I just asked them, what are some of the things that I do in this classroom that helped you when you first came to this job or help you on days that you're having a really challenging day? And so what they told me is that what helps them, and especially when they first started, because when they first start in our district, they really don't get a whole lot of training. And sometimes they're hired at the end of August, right before school starts. So they're essentially walking into a classroom with some really significant needs, whether it be medical, educational, or behavioral. And so they're already walking into a high stress situation. So what my goal is to try to make the classroom as visually inviting and simplified as possible to help them understand what their expectation is. So the one thing that I tell people, and I'm doing some consultation work right now for a behavior program in our district, and the first thing that I tell them is that when the people that you support first see your classroom, your work area, the materials that you provide, anything, and when I say people you support, that is students, and we also support each other as coworkers. So they should be able to have an understanding of what their expectation is just by looking at the environment. And so when students walk into my classroom, it's very visually structured. And that doesn't mean just pictures on the wall. That means the physical environment as well. It's laid out and very easy for them to understand and maneuver and navigate to, but they also understand areas that they should not be in as well without me having to tell them. One example of that is I will use red masking tape on the floor for any areas that they should not be in. Then we don't have to have a power struggle or talk about it. Blue tape is work areas, and so they know the areas that they sit and do work with adults or where they can be with us. So I shared this picture before, but I wanted to share it again. This is my classroom. We call this the motherboard, and this is our big communication board. And this, everybody in my room uses this. Students use it, my staff members, my paraprofessionals, our administrators use it if they're trying to find me and I'm somewhere all over the building. And also all of our service providers, so like speech, OT, PT, and then some of our counselors, if they have regular sessions with students or if they need to meet with me before they meet with a student, if we need to go over data. So this is broken down into 3 hallways, and it's color coded, so you can see all the math cards are orange and blue is English. And beside those are pictures of staff members. So I know all of my staff members can read, and I know they don't need pictures. However, our ESPs, we call them ESPs, sorry, paraprofessionals, they need a quick visual, especially when they're on the fly. They do not get a lot of breaks. I'm sure you all know that. And so they need to very quickly be able to come in. And this week I added, if you can see at the bottom of each column, you can't really tell what it is, but they're just magnetic plastic bins that each binder. And so we talked a couple weeks ago about the binder system and how we implement it school-wide at Spearfish Middle School. And so just like the students, each of my staff members has a color-coded binder, and they take these binders to each class and they collect a copy of any homework that's given or pre-printed notes. And that way we have our own copies within the classroom. And so this helps them stay organized. And you can see on the front of each binder is a homework checklist. They keep a list of the homework as well, in case a student forgets to write it down. That way they're not having to run back and forth between classes. We also make little notes under each section of any homework that needs to be done during study hall. And then at the bottom, that is for any textbooks that a class might provide. We keep extra copies in our classroom. That way we're not running back and forth to lockers. And my aides have said that this alone saves them so much grief throughout the day because they're not running and around and they're not having to log into a computer when they don't have the time to do it. And so that is something that I always try to keep organized and up to date. I try to go through every night and just kind of straighten it up and see if anything needs to be added or taken off that's finished. This is another way that I provide a support to my ESPs, which is what we call our aides, which the picture looks weird because of the way the slide is, but it's just a 3-ring binder. And if any of you have an account on Canva, C-A-N-V-A, you can make lots of labels that are really pretty for free. So I just went on Canva and made this, entitled it an ESP quick reference. So this is a binder where if I have a new staff member that comes in, I had one new ESP this year, and she can quickly go and look in that binder if she has any questions on how to do something. If I'm in a meeting, if I'm out of the building, or if I just am working with a student, I don't have time to answer a question. So they can very quickly go and look into this binder and see what their expectations are. And I just took some pictures of what this looks like. The first page over on the left is, I also have substitutes in our classroom use this binder as well. It helps them understand their day because it has schedules in it as well. But I also give them a copy of the student privacy and confidentiality because you can't expect a sub who has no special education experience come into your classroom and understand the confidentiality. Or a lot of times they'll come in and say, oh, what's their disability? What's their disability? And I'll say, well, I can't discuss that with you. And they get offended. And so a lot of times I'll go through this with them and talk to them about it. And then I give them this binder so they can carry it around throughout the day, or they can go back and check it. But a lot of this stuff is just little things that we don't think about even when we do trainings for our ESPs. So just simple and little things like printing and copying. What are you supposed to do during your lunch break? Clocking in and out. Morning staff meetings, who comes, who doesn't, what happens, is it required? These are just a couple other pages. I have a lot of pages in here. Another thing that I do, I always try to include a visual, and that's not because my staff are incompetent, but we know that chunking information and putting it into these little boxes and then attaching a picture with it, our minds can quickly retrieve that picture and help us remember information. And that's the same thing we're doing with students when we provide visual supports. So I am going to put these on the Google Classroom. I'm having trouble getting them transferred over because they're under my school permissions right now, but I'm going to have my tech department take those off and I'll get those on there today. And then you can make a copy if you want and edit it and put your own ESP or paraprofessional binder together to support the people that you work with. You could even make one for your service providers. And these are older pictures. This is from last year. Excuse me. But I also include this is our district calendar. And then I also have schedules for early release days. for any time that we get out early, our schedules are really, really different and jumbled up. So I provide these for staff as well. This is a cool visual support that I use for my ESPs and for our general classroom teachers as well. They both get copies. And I don't even know where I found this. It's on the internet somewhere, but you can, I think it comes in a Word document and you can edit it. And it has all these categories over to the left of, classroom organization, teaching, assessments, setting objectives, behavior management, working with parents. And there's even a second page that goes into a little bit more detail. But the nice part is you can edit this document for your school. Sometimes my ESPs don't know that as far as, if they have concerns or anything, it's not their responsibility to call the parent. I will do that. I communicate with parents. We have had that happen in the past and we have to go back and review their visual. But usually I don't have a whole lot of issues because they have read this document and for the most part remembered what their role is at least. And our general education teachers that I've shared this with have said, oh my gosh, this helps so much because I really wasn't sure what, like what the ESP was supposed to be doing or what I was supposed to do. And so this helps them understand what each of our roles are. And once again, we're color coding this, we're chunking the information, making it visual and easy to access. This is another document that I put in there, which you think, for our school employees, we use Infinite Campus for everything for IEPs and attendance. And then all of our teachers are required to use Planbook. So that's where you can find any of our homework for our students. And you think those things would be easy to access. However, when we are all super busy, we don't have time to always grab our laptops and log into something to figure out how to access it. So I just make this really quick, chunked out visual for staff to use. I even share this with our parents because parents access these at home as well. So I do have this on my website under my parent section. The next thing that we have is, so I have two binders in my ESPs have a work area where their lockers are that they keep all their personal stuff. And then they have a workspace where they charge their laptops and they have all of their highlighters and anything they need to take to class with them. And that's where that ESP quick reference binder is. But then I also include a student quick reference binder. And unfortunately, I could not share a lot of it with you guys, but I'll put some blank documents on the Google Classroom under the student reference materials. But this is just one thing that I do. I think I had talked about this one before. I make this cheat sheet of accommodations and modifications. It also includes medical and behavioral things. And this is provided to our general classroom teachers, our service providers, and my ESPs. So sometimes, especially around testing time for state tests or district tests, it's really hard to remember who has what accommodations when we have really big caseloads. So they can go back and quickly access this binder to see who has what, who needs what. I don't have them put them in their individual class binders that they carry around because sometimes those can get left laying around. So these materials never leave our classroom. That way we avoid someone seeing any kind of confidential information. And I do always try to put confidential at the top when I share anything with the general classroom teachers because I don't want them to leave it laying out on their desk. And I do have a lot more. I have each student's picture in this binder. I just printed off from Infinite Campus and it has their personal summary with like their parents' phone numbers and things like that in case of an emergency. And then any students who have a medical condition and we have a structured plan for whatever that might be. So some of my students have seizures. We have a seizure protocol that's kept in this binder as well. And I used to find all these really cool materials and I try to put a lot of stuff in this binder. And I found over the years that's just too overwhelming. So I try to limit it to between 2 and 4 documents per student. That way we're not going overboard. I do have the parents fill out, it's on the widget website, and I'm going to include it as well on the Google Classroom. It's called a student passport summary, and it is awesome. And it lists everything from your medical conditions to the medications that you take, to how do you sleep, to what works for the child, what doesn't work for the child. And so I'll include that as well, but I just didn't, there was a lot of confidential information on those, so I wasn't able to share pictures of those without having to mark them out. This is another way that I support my ESPs is through data collection, and this is how we collect data on their IEP goals. And so we make this little chart that we keep up in their work area, and then we keep it up in our data collection area as well. We have a specific area with all of our work and folders and binders and things that we work with each individual student. But the way I break it up is weekly data and then daily data. So the daily data is all of our adaptive skills, our behavioral skills that we're working on. And then you can't see it because I had to block out the names. So I put smiley faces over everything, but under each person's name is the student's name that they're responsible for each day that they collect data. Excuse me, I'm gonna get a drink real quick. And I print those data sheets, and though they do keep those with them, but the students' names are blanked out. They know who has what, and we only use initials on anything that's really confidential. But you can see that I do all of the weekly data collection. You can see the days, and these are on the left up here for the weekly data in yellow. You'll see numbers. Those are the class periods that I take that data, and then the days of the week that I work with that individual student. And we have 45-minute sessions depending on behavior. Excuse me. So these are those data collection sheets that my ESPs carry around, or I keep some in my work area as well. And so where each little gumdrop happy face is a student's name. I blocked those out. And these are all behavioral or adaptive goals that have been written for them. And then we just keep, so you can see the first one, when blank becomes fixated on a specific topic or event, he will complete a self-regulation sheet. These are the specific goals. So on the first page, you can see that in the yellow column, there are 3. And then I put a little note at the bottom to support my ESPs that, and I highlight it. So on the first one, they need to use the sticky thoughts materials. And they already have all of those materials in a binder that they carry around each day. We have a visual binder, and it's not very big actually, but specific to the students they go to classes with. And then you can see on that yellow row on the bottom, when beginning a task, blank will complete a task sequence strip. This is for a student who cannot figure out how to get dressed in PE and either tries to walk out of the locker room naked, or puts clothes on top of other clothes, or tries to get pants on with shoes on. So we have like a little Velcro task sequence strip, and we do it one at a time to help the student get dressed. And so I just put in parentheses and highlighted it yellow. This is for PE, and they know that. But sometimes I have to shift staff around, and I need it to be really easy for them to understand. I think the rest is all pretty self-explanatory, but the second column, total prompts. And so they just take little tally marks. So if today on that first one, if the student needed to use their sticky thoughts and they needed 3 prompts before they use their visual and work through it, they would do 3 tally marks and then just put the date beside it. And we just use this for 1 week. Then we add it to our big data collection. Sometimes we use the Swiss for the PBIS world, or I sometimes just use like a paper one depending on the kid. So that's how we take our daily data, and that's how I support the adults. But one thing I really wanted to reiterate was just like children, adults can really become overwhelmed and need supports too. And so just like we've talked about before, we need to calm the brain and increase independence. So my aides a lot of times will, especially if they're new, will come and check in with me a lot. And so I increase the visuals so I can increase their independence and they don't have to rely on me as much because I am pulled in a lot of different directions. Reducing their stress and increase their productivity. And so for adults to effectively support students, they need to feel confident in their role as well. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Please let me know if you have any questions. So just summing up what we have learned over the last 4 sessions, trusting the process. And I don't know, a lot of you might already be doing a lot of these things. And so this might be old news to some of you, or some of it, when I first learned about executive function, I was like, oh my gosh, my whole life makes sense now. It has all come together. I have seen the light. And just understanding executive function increased my confidence, because I was always not really very confident in even things that I knew and was good at. I wasn't confident in it because I didn't think that anyone really understood how I was feeling or how my brain worked. And then when I learned about executive function, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm not super weird. Oh, I'm a little bit weird, but this is something that a lot of people struggle with. And so I don't have to do things to help myself stay organized the way other people do it. Please, if you go on Pinterest, you'll see all these really pretty classrooms and all these ways to organize. But for me and the way my brain works, when I look at those, my brain is on overload. And so if there's a lot going on in a classroom, I cannot focus. So please keep that in mind when you're setting up classrooms or you're giving out a worksheet that's really busy. Sometimes even if for a student, if there is a worksheet that they get from a teacher and it's been copied multiple times and it gets that gray, those gray marks on the side, I will cut that off and reprint it. And just that sometimes can be a game changer for kids.
Casey, I have a comment.
Yes.
Excuse me. Prior to COVID, one of the things I did to set up some better executive functioning in students with brain injury was to provide a more three-dimensional space using wall dividers. You go in a typical classroom and it's just two-dimensional. Everything is height and width. And if you look at it from the teacher's point of view, it's very cluttered when they're looking at all the desks, everything on there. When the students are looking up towards the teacher or out in the room, everything is very cluttered. There's a lot of visual stimulation. And so what we were doing, and this is a product of some behavior training in Colorado, was to use wall dividers to create spaces, to create rooms within the room. For example, homework assignment areas where you turned in assignments. There was a wall divider, and on the back of the wall divider were examples of what the homework should look like. So it wasn't that you were just providing the answers, but it confirmed what a completed homework assignment would look like. But that was hidden from the classroom because it was on the back of the divider.
Yes, I love that. And that's that goes along with what I was talking about, is your physical environment. You're still chunking that information because you're blocking it off. My classroom is kind of like a maze when you walk through it, because my students have work areas and they know where they need to go, but the visual supports that they use are not viewable to other people who would be walking around the room or working. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I would love to see that, a classroom like that. That would be amazing. Thank you, Ross. So I made this really simple, the process, or just what we've talked about so far. And You could go down a million different rabbit holes with executive function. And have many times I've deleted probably 15 slides that I've created because I was like, no, I can't. It's too far to this way. I need to go back to this. And you can go into ADHD and all of these things, brain injury, and just so many things. So I really tried to keep it simple to help you understand. And I think I'm even going to print this slide off, this one that we're looking at, just for my general classroom teachers who use executive function strategies. But what we talked about in the first session, really be aware of your own executive function. Because if you are somebody who has great executive function and you don't take the time to step back and say, this is what the student needs, or I should probably be doing this, doing the things that probably you feel like you don't need, it will change your relationships with students. It will change your relationships with people you work with. They will feel more supported. And then that's where the learning begins. The behavior program that I'm working with now, I always tell them, behavior comes first. We're not even worrying about academics right now, because we need to get this behavior under control and our physical environment under control and our visual supports under control. When all of that happens, everything will fall into place, and then we can transition into the learning. But until that happens, you're fighting a battle that cannot be won. Chunk everything. I don't know how many people know what the home edit is. Look it up. That is executive function on steroids, and probably really expensive, but they chunk everything. They have clear dividers. Even in I'm terrible at sorting laundry. If I try to put all of my laundry into one big basket, it will be Sunday night at 7:30, and my kids are screaming, I have no clean clothes for tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, well, it's going to take, you're going to have one pair of clean clothes for tomorrow because our laundry takes forever. So what I did is I went to Walmart. I think it was, I don't even know the brand, Better Homes or something. It's a rolling cart. It has 4 different baskets. It's really pretty. It's like a slate gray. They're fabric baskets or bags on them, I guess. And then I just took my label maker, and on each bar, I put whites, delicates, colors. And so I did these things for my kids. We have no issues with laundry. It has been the best $30 purchase I have ever made. So, but we chunked the information. Because before, I would go in the bathroom and socks would be all over the floor. That's where we keep our laundry. Our hampers is in my bathroom. And now it's like they suddenly can get the laundry in the basket just because it's got its own section. Or even when you open our drawers in the bathroom, I went to Dollar Tree and bought these really cheap little plastic baskets and put a name on each one, and that's where the kids keep their toothbrushes. And by golly, they put them back every time now. Just by chunking that information, because toothbrushing time is a stressful time for anybody who has kids. They hate it, they fight it. But when you do that, it kind of, I don't know, I think when I did that for my kids, it calmed their brain a little, and they're better able to get through the process and not fight with me as much. And I'm removed from the process now, and they can just go in and do it themselves. Whereas before, I just had everything thrown in a drawer. So school's the same way, work's the same way. Chunk your own things. I have to chunk all of my work materials into binders, or I have color-coded baskets even for all of my visual supports in my life skills class, and all the things that I teach, I have to chunk that stuff too. Number 3, anybody who's works with individuals who have autism, we know visual, and people always think, oh, autism, visual. Yeah, well, no, visuals for everybody. We use Post-it notes. You can drive by Burger King. We all know that environmental symbol. So everything needs to be visual, because when you use visuals, you're supporting behaviors, you're calming the brain, you're increasing independence, you're taking yourself away from it. And the thing I always tell people is you, in the future, you can fade those visuals out. That is the whole point of the visual supports, is to teach a strategy and eventually over time fade that out. But at first, if behaviors are high, and I've been told too, oh, well, they're having behaviors, but they're not cognitive. They don't need all of that. They won't respond to it. Yes, they will, because they need something that their brain can retrieve quickly to help them understand the expectation and calm the brain. And then just create clear expectations for everyone. A lot of times we just focus so much on our students. Sometimes the problem is an adult problem. And sometimes teachers don't like to hear that. I told the teacher last week, this is a teacher problem. This isn't a student problem. We have behaviors here because your room is not appropriately set up and you do not have the visual supports in place to run this effectively. And so when you create clear expectations, you're supporting your students, your parents, your coworkers, and yourself. So just that is pretty much everything. But I wanted to leave a little bit of time. We have about 6 minutes and just wanted to, I'll stop my screen share, but I wanted to check with anyone and see if anyone had any questions for something maybe we didn't review. If you had a question about something we've reviewed in the past, if you just want to share a story or some information like Ross did, I think that's awesome. I'm going to share that. I love that so much.
So I am thinking about what you showed for data collection today. So your paras, when you had like the goals and then the prompts, were those color coded as well? So like the ones in yellow on the left-hand side were the ones that para or ESP, whatever you call them, have is color coded in yellow on that schedule also? Is that how that?
At ESP, there was 3 students listed on that chart, and those are the 3 students that ESP is in charge with daily, or in charge of taking their data. And I just color coded each column. So I color coded each student essentially. So they could know who was in this section. And essentially they can read the initials at the top of the page or the name, but when you color code that entire column, it just helps their eyes quickly shift. You know, for me and my crazy brain, a white piece of paper for me, I feel like I have to really focus harder and my focus is not good. So I have to focus harder on tracking the information down. But when you chunk it and you can color code it, my eyes can quickly know, here's this student, that top to bottom. So that I do all of these things because it helps me, but in turn I have found out, I started out doing it because it all helps me. But in turn, what I have found out over these many years that I've been doing this is it supports other people too. And I love getting people's feedback. Always talk to the people you work with and say, what am I doing that helps you? What should I be doing that would help you more? I always try to check in with people. I use Google Forms all the time. And so I have a Google form that I send out to my teachers at the end of, we have to do trimesters here instead of semesters. So I send a Google form out to all of my general teachers that I have students on my caseload in their classes and just say, how's my ESP doing? What are the positives? Anything they could improve on? And then I say anything that I can do to support you. How can I support you better? What do you need from me? And so I do that 3 times a year with all of the gen ed teachers. And then I do that with parents as well. They have a parent reflection form. And I just do everything through Google Forms. I get the best feedback through that because people can quickly do it through their phones. Sorry, I went on a tangent there. That's my brain.
No, thank you. I was trying to sort out like that the paras were color coded with the slide you showed before, and so that sheet was going between different paras through the day. But I see what you're saying. Gotcha.
They each have their own individual sheet. I create one for each para.
Okay.
And all of our sheets have different kids' names on them. And so on mine, there was only one name because I work with that student has the most significant behaviors. So I try to break it up by the intensity of the behaviors or who they're going out into classrooms with too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I will share all of that too on the classroom. I just need to get my permissions unblocked. Does anyone else have questions or want to reflect on something new that maybe you've learned that you didn't know before, or a strategy you want to try?
I would like to comment about your use of colors. I think it's a primary rather than a secondary thing. I think that our eyes are used to seeing colors. And when we go into a classroom, all the paper is just one color. You know, it's white against, what is it, black? And it doesn't seek attention. A lot of times, too much of the information on the worksheets are not well chunked either. There's,
Correct.
for example, too much information on one page. You know, I just think that delivery, presentation should be part of delivery. So, and I think that's what you're doing, and I think it's great.
Thank you, Ross. That's awesome.
You bet.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to share? Any questions for me? You have my email, so if even when we're done, if you have a question or you want to reach out or say, hey, this is a situation, what are you guys doing over there in Spearfish? I'm always happy to share materials and anything. One thing that I think probably the first class that we did, I was wearing this hat, but I have my screen share on, I think. So this is a brain model, and I have the printout for this, and I'm going to share it in the classroom as well. One of my aides is going to school to be a speech therapist, and so she had to do this for her class, and I borrowed it, but I have the PDF for this. So the cool part is you print it out on cardstock and then you label it. But the one thing that I have a training coming up in June with our staff to talk about our color-coded binders. And one thing I will say is when you're first implementing new methods, all this chunking, this color coding, you're talking about executive function, it's overwhelming to people, and it's really overwhelming to people who don't like change. You will have people who will fight you on it. I do daily, and that's okay. I love a good challenge, but I really try to focus on the people who are positive, because positivity grows, and that's how we got this whole thing started here. So the one thing you probably can't see, the one thing you could print this out if you wanted to present this kind of topic to your district or even to your team to say, hey, this is a real thing. This whole pink section is the frontal lobe. It's 1/3 of your brain that controls executive function. 1/3 of your brain. So uber important. And this is another great visual. We're supporting a behavior, sometimes from adults, with a visual. I can say 1/3 of your brain, but to some people that doesn't register. But when I walk around with the brain cap on and say, whoa, it's all of this, it's so much of your brain. Another thing that I have not put on there yet, I don't think I can share it because I could get in trouble for that, but I bought this, so I'll put the link in the Google Classroom. This is an executive function thing that I got. I think I got it off of, it's from goodsensorylearning.com, and it's called the Ultimate Mindful and Editable Planner Agenda for Students with Executive Function Weakness. It's awesome. It's like visual overload. There's so much in it. I wouldn't suggest some of it probably for elementary. It's more middle school, high school. So I'll share that link as well, but I think we're out of time. But this has been super fun.
A few questions. Sorry, my office phone is ringing in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Somebody asked if you could share your Google form for teachers and parents.
I sure can.
And then somebody else said that you had shared the online survey. Do you have any assessments you use specifically to assess executive functioning needs?
I don't have anything specific. One of that executive function test that you could take, it linked to a website called Seth Perlitzer. And when I watched it, I hadn't even heard of that guy or seen any of his stuff until I started looking for stuff for this class. And essentially all his videos are almost everything that I do. I do the backpack dump. I do all of those things. Mindful, when you watch his videos, he is good, but he says don't use binders. I think he's referring to trapper keepers where you keep everything in one big binder. So I wish he wouldn't have said binders. I wish he would have said trapper keepers. But because that kind of turns people off. I've had somebody come to me recently and say, he said not to use binders. I'm like, no, that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about a trapper keeper. But the one thing I know for executive function is I know when a kid has bad executive function by looking at their grades. I can see if they have lots of tardies. I have them dump their backpack out in front of me. Mystery solved. I already know. If it's a nightmare, they struggle. If they have a lot of behavior referrals, they struggle. I have a really, really old resource. It's for working memory. It's called the Walk 10, I think is what it's called. It has a lot of fun working memory activities that you can do to promote kind of that part of the brain, but I don't have an exact assessment that I use. Just kind of experience tells me when I see a kid, I'm like, oh yeah, you might be my twin brother. We are soulmates here because you just dumped your backpack out and there's nothing but, candy wrappers and a binder that's empty and some folders that haven't even been taken out of the wrapping. So yeah, I don't have anything special that I use, just experience, I guess, and understanding myself a little. Did I answer all those?
That's what was in the chat, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to share that Google form and I'm just going to upload a lot of stuff. That way you guys can just look through it, pick and choose what you want. And one thing I tell the teachers, that I do consultation for is don't try to do all of this in one day. Chunk it. This week, I'm going to implement this. So today, actually, as soon as we get off of this call, I'm headed over to one of our elementary schools and we're setting up a classroom and we are chunking the physical space. We are using dividers. We turn bookshelves to block off a work area so we can keep that distraction down and keep the visual pollution out of the rest of the room. But inside of that little workspace are the visual checklists and the social stories and the things that specific student needs. And so I might take a picture of my classroom too. I might just add like a little photo album onto that Google Classroom too. And the nice part is that I'll open the sharing. And so you guys can add photos as well. And you can also comment if there's anything within that Google Classroom, like a resource that you want to comment on. You can over on the side, you can comment on any of the resources. You can put a message out to the group. And this is a classroom that you can stay in. It's not closing. So this is a resource that you will continue to have. Is there any way the link to the Google Classroom could be emailed to all of us? It's through a class code. And so you would need to join that Google Classroom with a Gmail account. It will not work with G Suite through your school email because my tech department is not agreeing with me right now and they're trying to keep outside people out. So you would need your own personal Gmail account and then you could log in through that password, sorry. But I can email that code out to the group because I think I have everyone's emails.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording.